Good evening. Welcome tonight to a presentation about the Carnegie Library in Manitou Springs. Tonight on our panel, this will include myself. I'm Christine Lowenberg, Planning Director with the City of Manitou Springs. We have John Spears with the Pikes Peak Library District. He's the CEO and Executive Director. And we have our ratio design team. Eric, I'll let you introduce the team in just a moment, if that's okay. It looks like we have approximately 24 attendees in addition to the panelists, 25. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. 26 folks are joining us. Welcome. We are recording this. This is obviously held only via Zoom, and we are recording this and we'll post the recording to this meeting to the city's project page after the recording has been complete and processed. That, along with PDFs of tonight's presentation, will be there as well. And we encourage you to visit the video again and the presentation documents, because we look forward to an engaged conversation about this.
Thanks, Christine. So I'm Eric Grebliunas with Ratio Architects, and also with me is Elisa. And we're kind of leading the design team throughout this process. We also have a structural engineer, civil engineer, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers on the team as well. And also within the Ratio team is our landscape architect, who will begin to really engage with this project as soon as we have kind of this final design eventually picked out and moving forward. Christine, did you want to talk about funding at all, or do you want to touch on that at the end?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that in just a moment. So the funding for the work that's being done now is the result of a gift that was made to the city of Manitou Springs with the purposeful intent of correcting the ADA issues within the facility and ensuring that the broad community has access to the building. And so right now, what we are doing is we are working simultaneously on launching a capital campaign, as well as the next generation here, what you'll see tonight, of design concepts. So the format for tonight's meeting, just real briefly, what we will be doing, and I'll let Eric speak to that a bit as well, but what we will be doing is we will go through and we will share with you how we have come to some of the place where we are, what were the considerations. We have been working closely with the task force that has been working diligently as a part of the team for a very long time to gather community input. And so tonight, what we're hoping is that as we walk through these designs, you'll see aspects of this that you have come through in those community feedback sessions with the task force or with staff with the city. That'd be myself, or perhaps our city administrator or folks on city council. And as we get through that, then we'll come back to an exercise that I think will be a lot of fun, right? It's not an icebreaker in that you have to tell us what your favorite food was today, but we will ask you about your food today. So then we'll work through some conversational aspects there. And as a reminder, if there's anyone who is watching the recording of this, which will be posted after the meeting, you can send your feedback directly to me, planning@manitou-springs.co.gov, or you can contact me another means that's comfortable for you. So with that, Eric, how about I turn it back to you?
Sounds good. Yeah, so I'm going to be going through just kind of some of the preliminary information for this project. We'll talk about accessibility, historic buildings. We'll dig into the site a little bit, and then I'm going to run through the 3 design options we have, kind of one after another, just so you all can get an idea of kind of the diverse possibilities that this site could contain for us. And after we kind of go through those three options, we will kind of go back and recap them one at a time with you. And we're going to go through a keep, toss, create exercise with you, where we're going to pick out things we really love about the option, things we don't like about the option, and talk about things that we want to create and make sure get captured in the options. So, with that being said, with accessibility being such an important part of all buildings and all projects, this one in particular, it's really important to know that accessibility is more than putting an elevator in a building. It's making sure that every type of person that you can imagine will have the opportunity to use and enjoy this project. And that could go from someone who might not be able to see very well. Not being able to walk them downstairs is a more commonly understood one. And making sure that this library can serve children and adults in a similar fashion. And so what I was kind of alluding to before is we've been brought on to really explore some design options for this project. There's a design previously, and we've taken that as one of them to move forward. But we've also been asked to look at two other options to start to explore the site and see what type of opportunities might be uncovered. Maybe we were able to address some of the concerns that the task force has brought forward to us. And again, these design options are really intended to show a broad range of possibilities. And you might love one and not like another one, but it's really important to think about the things you do like about the different options, so we can kind of get a cohesive idea of maybe the best path that this project can take to move forward. And I guess that ties into the third bullet point, to where we're going to be presenting three options to the city for them to select. So all three of these options will be reviewed, and we need the community's help to make sure each one of them is the best possible version that they could be. And lastly, it's very possible that of all the three design options, there's elements that we all like from each of them that kind of maybe culminate in what the final design direction is. But the goal today isn't to pick which way we're going to be moving. The goal today is really to explore the pros and cons of the different options and make sure that we're putting forth, something that really represents what the community needs. And so, through our kind of research phase, we've been talking with the task force about the concerns. Obviously, paramount to this project is just making sure that we're able to operate a 21st century library. But we also know that there's some really critical elements for the community that we want to make sure that this project is able to capture. Honoring the Carnegie as a historic structure is critical for the success of this project. But also knowing that there's these beautiful mature trees all over the site, and we want to make sure that we can preserve as many as possible, if not all of them. And then we also know that the sledding hill is a really important feature of this site, and it looks like it'd be a ton of fun to go down. And so making sure that the design option that we move forward can maybe have limited impact on it, or in one of them, none at all. And then lastly, there's the preservation of the historic walls on site. And in one of our more recent meetings, we don't believe that we're going to be bringing any roads onto the site. So the site in its kind of pure open form and undisturbed nature is trying to be maintained as much as possible. And just to touch real quick on historic preservation and how we approach adding onto a historic building. It's important to note that that historic building was a modern building at its fruition. And as we're adding on to it, we want to make sure that the new building is of its own time. And in terms of materiality, there's the approach of matching the existing structure. And there's also, kind of tying back into making sure the building is of its own time, making sure the materiality represents, the current world we live in. And that materiality choice starts to add to the building story. So in the next 50 or 100 years, when another group comes to add on to this building potentially, that they're looking back at the decisions that we've made. Another really important thing is that these additions can be reversible. And by that, I mean, we want to make sure that we're not tearing down any large portions of the historic structure, that we're leaving it intact and just trying our best to add on to it, so that if in the future the need is to restore the building back to its original form, it can be done so in a more streamlined manner. And the addition wants to be sympathetic to the existing structure. And by that, we want to make sure that the existing structure is still the focal point, and it's still the element that's emphasized on the site. And lastly, it's the Secretary of Interiors who kind of inspire and govern the various preservation commissions around the state. And so there is a set of rules that, or guidelines that we want to make sure we fall within to really honor this Carnegie Library. And so with that being said, I'm sure you're all familiar with this photo. And what I want to do is just kind of walk through the site and some of the concerns of removing of trees and the sledding hill, and show you how the different strategies, just from a high level diagrammatic standpoint, will impact the site directly. And so the first option from a diagrammatic standpoint, I'll bring up is option 3. And so option 3 is going to try to minimize its impact on the historic structure by turning itself kind of into a podium or a pedestal for the existing building. And it's placed at that center of the park where it's a little too sloped for kind of a function. And it's trying to kind of reclaim the middle of the park and turn it into functional space. And through that building placement, we're able to avoid taking out any trees. And we're also able to preserve the sledding hill and not touch the historic wall to the south. Option 2 would be located to the right of the structure. Again, we're showing a smaller yellow line for it because it's going to try to be understated to still let the existing structure remain the proud element on the site. The unfortunate part of locating the building to this side is that there is an existing tree that would have to be removed, and that the sledding hill gets greatly reduced. Now, there's the possibility of tightening the building footprint up to give more space back to the sledding hill, but that's kind of something that we want to talk to you about. And then the last option, which is option 1 for our terminology, is continuing on the previous design. And what that option does is it really extends the style of the existing structure out to the right of the building and kind of honors the historic structure in the way that it's a continuation. And similar to the previous option, this one would need to remove a tree and will also be reducing that sledding hill distance. But this option will have less of an opportunity to shrink itself and give back to the sledding hill. And with that being said, I'm going to jump into the more specific designs so we can start to see what that architecture starts to look like. So it'll just take a moment to load, but what's on the screen now is just the existing structure. And I'm going to open up the third design option, which places the building kind of in the heart of the park. And so what this option is trying to accomplish is to minimize the impact on the existing structure by digging itself into the earth and becoming that podium for the historic Carnegie. So it remains the proud element on the site. And at the same time, by putting the addition here, we're able to create this moment within the middle of the park that, instead of being slope topography, now can become this flat rooftop that could be utilized for community events, for library spill out. There's many different functions that could be served up on this rooftop. And then users can still enter the building as they might have in the past, but it allows them to then circulate and have some of these great views over the city. And then also, in terms of the accessibility, what we've proposed is a smaller addition onto the side of the library, which would contain the stairs and elevator. And so now that we've kind of seen the three of this, I'll open up the floor plans just so we can kind of walk through what the plan opportunities are for this. So at the upper level, which is currently the main library space, the existing stairs and entry point would remain. And what we propose is a walkway along the south edge that would allow patrons to come and access this secured vestibule where the elevator and stairs can take them down to the different levels. With the upper floor kind of remaining that opportunity for admin to have the space that they need to really operate at their maximum efficiency. And as you go down to the next level, this is the roof level. This is where we could locate the main meeting room. And what we've done is added, this is kind of the old children's area. We've added 2 restrooms here. So this meeting room has the opportunity now to spill out onto the roof deck. It could be kind of secured for after hours community use. And with that after hours community use, it would still have access to restrooms and kind of be a really nice standalone opportunity for after hour usage. It can support any type of community event that might be happening on the patio deck. And then as we drop down to the lower level, which is what spills out onto the park, this would be the main library edition. And to be entered from the north or through the stair and elevator cord to the south. And users are allowed to flow into this very flexible, open library plan. And this is part of that 21st century library goal, where you want to make sure that there's maximum flexibility for the programming needs of the library to allow them to serve the community to their best capacity. And the program elements are things that we derive from the previous design iterations. So we have study rooms located towards that north elevation, so they have some daylight. And then the children's area as well is easily visible from a staffing standpoint, but also has that really nice adjacency to spill out onto the park space. And we're then able to store or put some of our building services kind of in that more dug into the earth area, with the young adult area kind of having its own little special location. And so this is the third option. I'm kind of going backwards, I know. So I'm going to jump over to the second option and give everyone a higher view of that. Just give me one moment to load it.
Eric, while you're pulling that up, I think one of the things that is great to point out on all these designs is that with that back entry, well, what is now the back, but that is right across from the elementary school. And as a design partner, the elementary school has expressed interest in utilizing the space. So in all of these designs, that's a feature that I want to be sure we call out for folks to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. So option 2 is the diagram where we're trying to have the addition kind of dig into the earth adjacent to the historic structure and take on as minimal of an impact on the site as possible. Really trying to let the addition fade away and making sure that historic structure remains proud on the site. And so, the site elements would function very similarly. Just in terms of the center of the park, your main building access would still be through that split level stair. But I think what's important to point out for this option in particular is just how, by digging it into the earth, which we'd have to do for foundations anyway, we're able to kind of capture that park space and try to give it back. And what we've kind of proposed as the interesting part of this option is allowing the top of this addition to be a green roof. So while there is the addition going here, we want to make sure that we're not taking away park space. And we do know the sledding hill was here. So that would be a lot more difficult to do. But there is the opportunity to start to talk about the final perimeter if this is the direction that we end up heading. But by making this a green roof, we're able to really take advantage of those outdoor spaces and kind of create these private moments, for some outdoor reading and really encouraging that connection to nature. And as I'll kind of walk around the north real quick here, the new kind of accessible main entry of the building would be this north south-facing vestibule. And again, making sure that the historic library is really what is the prominent element on the site, and letting the addition have a materiality and scale that allows it to be secondary in nature. And so I'll open up the PDFs for that and we can walk through the plan. So starting on that upper level again, users can circulate in along the south edge of the building. They can still enter as they would have before through that split level stair, but now the accessible entry would be through that rooftop garden area, through the secure vestibule, and then into that elevator and stair area. You'll have adjacency to the admin zone, which again is that upper floor of the existing library for your book drop. But then as you circulate down, you kind of come into this kind of cozy, open, tucked away library space where your whole north elevation will have these wonderful views of the park space. And then, we try to rearrange the space in a way similar to the previous option, that it's as open and as flexible as possible, where computers have the opportunity to be grouped together or broken apart, making sure that we're adding those needed study rooms and meeting rooms to allow for any of those potential after-hour opportunities. And a more difficult part of this one is, compared to the previous option, is how would you go about closing this or allowing the meeting room to be open for after-hours use when it's tucked away within the library space. And so we've kept the children's library in that lower level of the existing library as is now, and the young adults take up part of that northern window space as well. So they kind of have their own private space, but are still kind of directly adjacent, and everything is visible from that main library circulation area. And then to pull up the first option here. I'll get us back to that first viewing area. And so the first option is really running with kind of the previously established design. And that's honoring the existing Carnegie by continuing it on. Its materiality would be the same, and its massing is trying to be complementary to the existing library while still having some articulation to make it a little more distinguished in its own way. And so it would have entry points along the north elevation through the park, through a vestibule that could be locked after hours. private access after hours. And then along the north side as well is where the main entry would be. And so in plan view, what we did is we started with the original outline of the previous design, which has been through the Historic Commission, has been approved. And we have the same vestibule along the south. And the update we've done from it is just to shift the elevator and the stair over to the east, just to kind of get it out of the middle of the library. And again, trying to open up that library space to make it as flexible as possible for the broad range of current needs, but also making sure it's flexible enough to serve the changing needs in the future. And as you enter the space, you have the admin area on your left with the young adults in that northwest corner. So they'll have nice views out, but still accessibility to that roof deck. And then that top floor of the existing library remains kind of in its current function. And then when you circulate down to the lower level, the children's library remains where it currently is. And we're able to utilize the existing window openings in the structure to connect the lower level to a gallery space and the meeting and study rooms that we've kind of been seeing reoccurring throughout the other options. And again, in all three of them, we've been adding restrooms for the public and for staff. And so that's kind of the high level run through all of the options. And what I'm going to pull up now is the start of some of our engagement process, where we're going to be asking you all to start to join in and provide some feedback. So there'll be two ways where you can do this. One is through your web browser. You can go to pollev.com and just enter ratio in the bar that pops up, and it'll bring you right to the slides we start to talk about. And the other option is by text. And if I go to the next slide, it will show up. There we go. So, and if you're going to do it by text, so in your text messages for the number, type in 37607 and just text ratio to that number. And that will allow you to provide responses to whatever slide we pull up on the screen. So as a test to make sure we're all able to vote here real quick, just asking the question if you've eaten dinner yet tonight. I have not yet, so for all of you saying yes, I'm jealous. And so we'll just give you a few minutes to kind of, or a minute here, just to throw in your response. And I'll make sure we're getting responses on my end in our software here. We've gotten 14 responses so far, so that's really great. I think I'm sorry for the majority of us who have not eaten yet.
At least we're not asking what folks have eaten for dinner, right? I mean, who knows what kind of responses we could get then. It could be everything from pizza to pasta or steak or a Slim Fast shake. I was talking to someone earlier and told them we were going to be asking this. They're like, just don't ask me what I'm having because it's going to be a protein shake. It was really funny.
I was sure to have a snack before we started. Okay, we got 21 responses and there's 46 people in the call, so 50% is really good.
It is. And we do encourage all of you who are watching, we really want all of your participation as we go through this because your responses do matter. And we'll be keeping track of what sort of input we get on each of the designs. So please, we encourage you as we go through to grab your cell phone or another device or flip over to another tab in your screen.
Yeah, and I know I'm going to say the same thing that Christine just said, but we're going to be presenting all three of these options. We're not selecting one to move forward with. So we want to make sure that everything that we're bringing to the table for review is reflective of the community's desires and really is going to serve them the best that it possibly can. And so I think with that being said, so we're going to go through what we call a keep, toss, create exercise. And I touched on it earlier, but I'm going to bring up each of the design options individually, and we're going to talk about what we want to keep from those options, what we want to toss from those options, and what we want to create from those options. And the goal of this is to really try to find that common thread amongst the group that it will really help us understand if an option really nailed it and it's exactly what the community wants, or we'll be able to find out if there's just something about an option that is just it's so off base that it can't move forward as it is. And we want to make sure we capture all of that feedback. So with that being said, we're going to start with design option 3, and I'm gonna pull the kind of the walkthrough up here real quick. We'll kind of just take a moment to load. We should be good to go here. And so on my screen, I've got the landscape open, but you're still able to vote and provide your comments as we're going through this. So with this up, I just want to hear from the group of, what do you like about this option? Is it the opportunity to kind of have the middle of the park being this functional space? I see that the first one that came in saying that the hill is more manageable. Yeah, I mean, when I came out for the site walk, and I've been kind of studying the site from Google Earth for so long, that I just saw the center of the park area, and I thought it was going to be this really magical moment that everyone would gather around. And then when I discovered that it was really sloped, it was really inspirational of thinking about, well, how can we give that back to the community and really make it a functional space? I heard that there's music in the park at times, so I could imagine, the band or someone setting up top and playing to the rest of the community. Let's see some of the other things that have come in here. Yeah, the low profile of the addition, I think, is a really good point. Sorry for scrolling off of that. So let's take a second to repopulate here. Yeah, with the addition kind of being tucked underneath the existing building, it's kind of creating that pedestal for the Carnegie to be the proud element on the site, and it's really kind of giving it that prominence.
Hey, Eric, you're on the option, not the keep option, just to let you know.
Whoops. Can you say that again, Lisa?
Yeah, so you're on, you just scooch it back.
Are we on option 3 still? Oh, on the toss.
Or keep, sorry.
I see. Well, I apologize to everyone for being on the wrong slide. I'll let these keep generating, and then so we're still on the keep. We'll move on to the toss in just a moment. I like it all. That's great to hear. Yeah, the low impact to park is really an interesting thing about being able to utilize the rooftop deck for a few of the options, and it really kind of helps such a nice park not lose as much open space? I'm kind of curious about, what type of community activities do you think you would imagine seeing here? If you enter, I'm sure I'll find them in a moment. Yeah, and so being up here is going to really have amazing views, really kind of help connect it to the community.
Eric, are you able to pull back and kind of pull back to the front of the park so we could be reminded of what this looks like from the
Yes.
front? So if we're standing at the street, this will help us visualize what we'll see, right?
Yeah, so if you're just walking down Manitou Ave.
Okay.
Yeah, the after hours flexible space, being able to lock that space off is great. We'll put the yuck, it overwhelms the space in the toss part. It's a fair point. See, I like the impact on the hill and how it enhances the original Carnegie. I like the outdoor options, but I feel like it does relatively little to increase usable space. Yeah, on that rooftop area, it's kind of hard to picture what that could be, but this could be full of pavers. It could be outdoor reading space. It could be a green roof, in reference to this comment about, can we do a park roof instead of a stair-looking space? I mean, absolutely. There could be planters throughout here to kind of give back that greenery that's being taken up by this addition.
Eric, how much flexibility do we have, just as we're talking about this design right now, how much flexibility do we have in terms of how large or not it is?
That's a good question. So what's really nice about option 3 and option 2, and I'll pull up the plan here, is that because it has this open floor plan, it's not a bunch of specific rooms kind of puzzled together that if you reduce part of it, then it all kind of falls apart. You're able to really, pull and push the walls more easily to maybe make the building a little more narrow or make it more shallow. And you can get into, when we work with the library, about how much space do they really need, and so this really gives that ultimate flexibility. Another part of it is cost, and by changing a building's area, you're able to dramatically change the building's cost. It's the easiest way to cut costs from a building is just reduce its size. And having a flexible design kind of gives that option to the library moving forward, when we eventually get to that bidding phase, to really be nimble and adjust based on how much the building is coming in.
Okay, thank you. At some point, we'll break and let folks ask a couple of questions. Do we want to do that after we start the toss part of this, or later on? At what point would you?
Let me switch over to the toss, and then maybe we'll open up questions while we're doing the create.
Okay. And so there have been a couple of hands that have come up, and that's what prompted me, probably folks who have questions, similar to mine. And so what we'll do is, I'll unmute your mic, and if you want to ask the question, and we'll try to, just in case there's a number of people who have questions or comments they want to share, we'll try to limit that to just a couple minutes, very similar to City Council or some of the other meetings. So the first one I see is Bonnie. Bonnie, your hand is raised, so I'm going to unmute your mic. And if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you certainly are. We'd love to hear what you have to ask or comment on. We'll give her another minute. She may not realize she has her hand raised. I also saw that Corrine had a question or a comment. Corrine, if you still want to, just if you want to raise your hand. Okay. Go ahead, Corrine.
Can you hear me okay, Christine?
I sure can. Welcome,
Okay.
Corrine. If you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
My name is Corrine Toll. I live at 457 Crystal Hills Boulevard in Manitou Springs. And my comment is that it is very difficult for me to gauge what my preferences are without knowing what the additional square footage that is being added amounts to and what the cost is. I mean, it's, you know, those are very basic, fundamental citizen needs to understand. So that will help me for each level. That will help me decide which I like. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, very good question. I should have touched on it at the beginning. So all three options match the same square footage of the original concept, and that's that 3,600 square feet. And what we did is look at how to shift that around the different levels to see what different opportunities might arise from that kind of reorganization of space. So square footage wise, it's at 3,600 mark. And in terms of cost, we don't have a number at this process, at this early in the process yet, but we do kind of have a ranking in our head of what would be the most expensive versus the most affordable. And we're anticipating that the second option, where it's kind of dug into the side of the hill adjacent to the structure, would be the most affordable. This option, similar in nature and scale as the one dug into the side, would be the second more expensive. And the option where it's a continuation of kind of that really nicely articulated historic facade, just from a lot of the more intricate work, would be the most expensive option.
Thank you. Just to remind us where we are we on the keep of which design?
Yeah, we're on the keep. And I should note that we're going to have all of these comments collected and be able to really dig into them with the stakeholder group, and making sure that we're able to address the broad community as much as possible. So I know we've been on keep for probably too long, and there's been some toss things in the keep. So just to make sure we're tracking them well, if you put a toss idea in the keep, if you could retype it here, that would be really great.
And there's a couple more hands going up, so let's get through the toss and then let folks put those in and you answer questions, and then we'll take two more. Does this design disturb this front of the building? I saw that as one of the comments.
Yeah, and that's to a degree, definitely there's, we're showing this view to really realistically indicate what that final building would look like. And this option from the street level is, it's cutting off a portion of the building, and the topography is also kind of doing that. But as you move up the site, very quickly, the addition, the goal was to really have it be this pedestal and podium for, the prominent display of the structure was our attitude. And, it's a really good point, and that's where we really want to sit down and discuss with the Historic Commission to go through the pros and the cons of the approach and the appropriability of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it okay if I let a couple of folks when we'll try to keep it brief. So
Mhm.
the next one is Judith Chandler. Judith, I have unmuted your mic, and if you just want to introduce yourself, welcome.
Thank you. Judith Chandler, 120 Beckers Lane, at-large city council member. With this particular design, I see a very stark difference between the historical look of the building and the modern addition. Would it be possible to make the addition more in keeping with the historic character of the library? I'm really a fan of the smallest footprint that preserves our trees and our sledding hill, and this is a very appealing design to me. But I'm asking you, is there a way to blend the two architectural designs into one that looks more like the historic Carnegie Library? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really perfect comment, and why we really want to hear. And these are the things that we'll have to discuss. But yeah, the materiality of this addition, right now is got that modern, minimalist look to it. And, just in terms of expressing as many different ideas to the group as possible and getting the feedback, I think we took it to as far as we felt comfortable in trying to minimize the visual impact of that on the space. But, to your point, if this is the option that ends up being the path forward, yeah, the materiality of this can change. There could be brickwork on the walls instead of glass at times, and more punched openings. We can get into the coloration of the fascia to maybe more closely mimic or replicate kind of the tonality of the brick to let it kind of tie in a little bit better. But absolutely, that's the kind of level of detail we'd want to really explore if we move this forward.
Okay. Just one more. We've got a couple more here, and we'll try to be quick so we can get to the other two designs. Let's see. Regina, I've unmuted your mic. If you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great. Welcome.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Can you
Hey,
hear
Regina.
me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I'm Regina DiPadova at 820 Midland, Manitou Springs. And actually, Judith asked my question, and I agree with her comments. I agree with what Judith just said. So I don't have any comments.
Well, thank you. That's great. All right. I will go ahead then, and I think Megan is next. Megan, I'll unmute your mic if you just want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi guys. Hey, thanks for the presentation. Again, kind of Judith asked that question of mine, but I just real generically would like to know, why have we focused more on the right side of the building, the west side, and not so much the east side? I'm sure there's some reason, but I'm just unfamiliar to that. I'm wondering why the build out wasn't focused on the left. But then also I'm curious, within all of these three designs, is it a possibility to have it scaled back a little bit? All the designs could be great, but just wondering if, when looking at these, is there the possibility to still, again, scale it back in size?
Yeah, great question.
Awesome.
So we were looking at doing the addition on, I guess what we'll say, the left side or the east side of the structure. However, where our kind of conversation would usually lead, especially when kind of working with our historic preservation specialist, was, which side of this building would allow the existing structure to remain the most prominent. And, being that, viewed from the the side, this was the previous main entry. We really wanted to make sure to maintain this elevation as pure as possible, and that's why this western elevation is typically where we kind of emphasized altering or adding on to the existing building, was because it was the least visible portion of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. Let's there's one more. Actually, I think there's two more. Let's David, I'm going to unmute you if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm David Corpenny. I live on High Ridge Road in Manitou Springs.
Hi, David.
And one of the things I'm trying to, I guess, kind of back up a little bit and understand what are the uses for a 21st century library? So is there, research that was, looked at or done to determine what a library patron needs, both for a physical library and for a virtual library?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. Eric, I have John Spears on also, so if you two want to tag team on that. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you, David. Well, I think, from my standpoint, I guess I would just kind of talk to some of the community items. And, the reason we reach out in these sessions is to really understand, the library needs to be of its community, and it really needs to provide the support that the local residents really need. And, for some projects, that's more typical. In other locations, that turns out to be something that can turn into a really special moment. We worked on libraries in the past that actually turned out to have the desire to have a little bit of an automotive workspace in it, for example. And a key to 21st century libraries is to make sure that they're flexible enough to really adapt to the ever-changing needs of where that program type needs to go. And I suppose maybe with that, John, do you want to talk about kind of the Pikes Peak strategy?
I'm sure. The strategy for this edition actually goes back many years. There's been numerous outreach, at times that there's been outreach to the community about what they're looking for in an expanded library, going back 20 years to long before the library was actually a part of the Pikes Peak Library District. The most recent time that it involved a lot of community interaction was, I believe, in 2016 and 2017, which is what led to the creation of the Thorpe plans. For Pikes Peak Library District, we have a community needs assessment that we conducted in 2019, where we worked with Elevated Insights to actually get a snapshot of what it was that people were looking for in terms of the types of services that they would like in the library. So the square footage, the layout, the choice of having, for instance, meeting rooms and study rooms are not things that were just kind of created out of whole cloth. Those are things that came from our own experience of operating 15 libraries in El Paso County, a community needs assessment that was done just about a year and a half ago, and then ongoing discussions with the residents of Manitou Springs that stretch back 20 years.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then there's one individual left, Sarah Kletzik, I believe. So I'm going to unmute your mic. If you want to take a minute and introduce yourself, welcome.
Did you unmute? Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are. Welcome.
Okay, great. I'm Sarah Bryant. I grew up here. I hold this building dear to my heart. It has served me and many children all throughout the decades without any expansion. I don't feel that the deck space is going to add to our experience of life with the library at all. I want to thank Judith for totally summing up my thoughts There's nothing historic about this design at all. I do like the idea of enlightening the children's space underneath a little bit for sure. How come there is no, well, okay, hold on. Can we just scale it back a little bit? And why isn't the HPC kind of all over the front of this design? Because if I was historic preservation, I would say absolutely not.
Sure, great.
Yeah, and how is parking going to accommodate a larger library?
Okay, let's break some of those down. Let's start with parking. Eric, do you want to talk about what we have or have not discussed around parking?
Yeah, so we haven't kind of discussed the addition of new spaces as part of this yet, just because kind of the final site circulation needs to be sensitive to that south historic wall and not wanting to remove any of that. So, our focus has been just trying to understand the different pros and cons of the building placement on the site, and then working towards, what type of parking solutions could support this a little bit better. I know there's a discussion of whether or not ADA spaces need to be added for this building, but there's also the potential viewpoint that there's enough parking around the site to serve the structure. So, I think that's a really important conversation that we keep having, and will be reflected in the final design.
Okay. I'll comment on HPC and how Historic Preservation Commission works in this. The design, what's called design option 1 here, which is the expansion. It's the much more grand option. That footprint and the materials that were used overall, that was the idea, the concept that went through HPC several years ago, and they found that was fitting. But we expect, and I have a schedule to go back to HPC as well as PARAB, the Parks Advisory Board. And what we'll do is be looking at all the feedback we get for these 3 concepts. We'll be taking forward discussion of materials, what sort of materials would be used. The points come up a couple of times, can we soften this? Can we make this look more green or more historic? And that's where HPC would come into it then, based on our feedback. So, okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Eric, so we can keep going with the Keep, Toss, Create.
Thank you. And I think the last one, and this usually goes much quicker than the first 2, is just the create phase. What missed opportunity did this design option present, that if we were able to do it, it would take it to the next level. And so, yeah, making the deck a green roof, just to make sure that we're not truly taking up the park space and we're able to give it back, I think is a really, really good one. Another create is probably going to be, how does that materiality start to more closely reflect the existing structure, to let it blend in a little bit more. Yeah, you were probably typing that up and sent it in just as I started saying that. But yeah, I think that's a really, really great idea that could really help kind of blur the line between the existing and the new. Yeah, blending with the existing structure. It's always really important to understand a community's ties to an existing building, to appreciate, some communities would love this building, and there's other communities that just wouldn't, they want to move on. But obviously we want to celebrate and preserve this the railing isn't to code. That is a fair comment. We're not showing all the needed parts of it right now. I'm cheating a little bit. Parts that would flow all around the Manatee Library. That's a really inspirational statement. You know, a lot of more the common thread of just tying back in with the park a lot better. Yeah, a rail that might talk a little bit more to the previous context. Reducing the size is it's something we have to study with the program. Solar is a really interesting question. How to supplement the power, or maybe sell back. Scrap this idea, move on. We have to present 3, and you know, hopefully when we present this one, it's able to address a lot of these big pain points for the community. The patio doesn't need to be so large. You know, there's strategies that we can do that maybe visually, you know, patio is basically as big as the addition. So maybe only part of that's a patio and the rest of it's a more economical roof. Okay, well, I know I wish we could spend a lot more time going through each of these. But you know, all of these comments are going to be stored and available to be viewed. So well, our step is for each of these, it's going to be to go back through and really find the common thread, the common pain points, the common things that we want to celebrate, and make sure that what we present to the city, again, is the best representation of this option to the community.
Okay.
So with that being said,
yeah,
we're going to go up to option 2. And so as a refresher, option 2 is the one that takes the library addition and moves it to the side of the structure. So for those of you who felt like this was too prominent, you'll probably like that this option is more tucked away into the earth. I'll update in just a second. There we go. And for those of you who kind of had the issue with the materiality and not necessarily replicating what was done in the past, you'll have that same comment for this one. But similar to the previous option, is that we can study this elevation and, you know, tone down the modern aesthetic and maybe bring on some more traditional materials, or maybe it's keeping the aesthetic and just really focusing on the coloration of it. I'm gonna work my way up to the top. You know, the insulation value that it's going to gain from being dug into the earth will really help the heating loads in the wintertime. And you know, what's really fun about doing these is we'll all have our favorite options, and we're not necessarily all going to agree of what's the best one, but what our goal is to really find, again, that common thread that allows us to take our favorite parts of each of these and turn them into something really, really special. Yeah, this is a lot less prominent in that it's tucked behind the existing structure. Less intrusive to the front, absolutely. Keeps the prominence of the existing building. It looks smaller. Yeah, the one coming out the front definitely appears to be larger. The options are just a result of the program area that we're needing to represent in the building. That's what we've been tasked with. And we can address the modern aesthetic of this project. And oops, sorry, I hit my mouse button incorrectly there. It's very sensitive. Yeah, working with HPC is going to be just such a key component to the success of any of these options. And I think that blending of historic with modern it's a tricky balance. And you know, there's some really successful Carnegie editions that have done that in the past. Have any hands popped up, Christine?
Let me look. I had a couple of emails coming in about this at the same time, so I was looking at those
Okay,
two to make sure there wasn't anything I
okay.
needed to add here. Let me check. Okay, looks like Megan. So I'm going to unmute you, Megan. You want to reintroduce yourself one more time?
Yeah, hi. This
Okay.
is Megan Engelhart, Manitou resident. And I'm just I'm still hoping to get an answer to my first question.
Uh-oh, I think you
Are
cut
you
out
there?
on us.
I'm not sure what happened. We'll give her a minute, see if she comes back. Megan, are you there? Okay, we may have lost her. We'll come back to her if she pops back on. Let's see. And then we've got, looks like Teresa, who spoke earlier. Teresa, I'm going to unmute you if you want to ask a question, just reintroduce yourself. And then I saw the school district as well in here. Let's see if they're still there, but go ahead.
Can you hear me by chance?
There we go. We've got
Okay,
you.
I'm sorry. Yep, I'm having a little bit of issue. So basically, I'm trying to get an answer to my first question I'd asked, and that was,
Oh, you just cut out on us again. I think it seems like there's a lot of consistency through, you know, appreciating that the existing building is remaining proud, and there's that green space that's being given back to the park, and this is a little less prominent. What this option doesn't gain, though, is, you know, having an accessible kind of heart of the park for functionality, which I think is one of the nice advantages of the last option, is that it really activates the heart of the park.
Let's see. I don't think we have her yet. Megan, are you there?
yeah, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear
Now
me
we
yet?
can.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm not sure what's going on. But basically, my question is, within all three of these designs, can we scale them back in size, each of them
Yes.
independently?
Yes.
Okay, and then if that's the case, would we be able to see those designs in the future?
Oh, of course. I mean, tonight is meant to gather your input on the three concepts, and we'll continue carrying this forward. We'll continue to publish them. We'll have another community meeting. We'll be at City Council in a couple of weeks as well. And then before City Council makes, you know, some sort of recommendation on what they prefer or like about these, then there would be a pretty deep discussion in terms of cost and actual square footage. That part of the conversation will be heavily intertwined with the capital campaign, which is just getting started, because we don't have, you know, we have cost estimations from several years ago of what the large addition would look like. We have to go through and we have to update that, and then of course see what we qualify for in terms of historic grants and Carnegie grants.
Well,
So-
and I think it would be helpful, you know, to see these options, because they're all great, you know, but to everyone's viewpoint and concerns, to have it all scaled back. And, you know, to quote Eric, he said, you know, option 2 does greatly reduce a lot of that green space. So, you know, when an architect is saying it's greatly reducing a space, you know, to provide an option B to, you know, let's say number 2, that would kind of, you know, for the visual people, that would really be able to enhance, you know, the support of it.
Mm.
So, you know, to see these concepts are great, but then also to see the minimalized, smaller design of them would also be helpful for me. I don't know about anyone else, but, you know, just to have that visual print.
Sure. No, it's a good point. And I'm sorry if we didn't answer that thoroughly the first time. Okay, I'm going to jump down to Craig Carnick. Craig, I'm unmuting you if you want to introduce yourself.
My name's Craig Carnick. I live in Crystal Hills. Christine, I am curious if all of these designs are based on 3,600 square feet. Where does that number come from before anybody talks about downsizing or upsizing? What is the right size? How did you come to 3,600 square feet on the lower level?
That's a great question. John, do you want to talk a little bit about that? And keeping in mind 3,600 square feet, I mean, what's the average home size in El Paso County? About 2,500 square feet. So what does that mean when we're looking at sort of a larger home for El Paso County in terms of a library? How does that translate?
Well, what I can say is really quick, with the 3,600 square foot addition, that would bring the size of the library up to our next smallest library, which is the Colorado City Library. The way that number was really arrived at is it's based, for the most part, on the Thorpe designs. And then that was just kind of translated, that the amount of square footage that was added was translated into the other 2 designs. That's a safe statement, isn't it, Eric?
That's right.
And the way that, and when you look at that, the Thorpe designs were built around the community, all of the community outreach that was done in terms of what is necessary for the programming of the library. So once again, this number is not an arbitrary number. It is one that is that came from working with the community just a few years ago, and then also comes from our own experience with the other 14 libraries that we operate. Expanding this by 3,600 square feet is not going to make this, to be honest, a large facility. It's going to make it it will still maintain its status as one of the smallest libraries in the Pikes Library District.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to try to look for folks who haven't had the opportunity to give feedback yet. Do you want to, Eric, are we at a point? It doesn't look like it's slowing down. I was going to say, if it looked like it was starting to slow down, if you wanted to move to the create slide, and I would bring over we've got a former councilman, Bob Todd is on, and allow him to introduce himself.
Yeah, I'll jump over the create, but there's some really good toss comments in here. I know some of the previous option will apply to this as well.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead. So I've just unmuted Bob Todd. If you want to introduce yourself, welcome to the meeting. Nice to see you tonight.
Thank you, Christine. Good evening. I think the group has done a fantastic job putting up first stake out here to the community. So a lot of gratitude for everybody who's brought this to fruition at this point. A question is, on my part, is it possible to change the geometry of this particular scenario? Aesthetically, I find it very pleasing. I do find it disappointing that it takes up so much of the sledding hill. So a change in geometry could look like putting more structure up on the deck, or digging back further into the hillside, making it longer and narrower. Any comment on that?
Yeah, we were actually just talking about that last week. depending on how, that's the balance between discussing with the community, what's the priority of the sledding hill, because we can absolutely dig this further back and have it be a longer space, and start to incorporate some light wells just to make sure that as it's dug into the earth, that it's still getting really nice natural light into it. Because as you make it narrower, you just shrink your northern window exposure. And so that's kind of the delicate balance of understanding where the priorities are for this project. And keeping that in the back of our heads, it's if this were the option that were to be selected to move forward, it's kind of that level of refinement is really where the conversation starts to go. And so instead of having 3 completely different design options to talk about that don't necessarily relate to each other, then you start to get into 3 different design options of this same layout, where you start to explore the pros and cons of different massings. Good thing to bring up.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was a great point. I think that came up with us too when we looked at this. We were like, how could we? So great. Thank you. Where are we at now? Are we in create for this?
Yeah, we're in create for option
Okay.
Option 2. So we just have one more to go through. And I just wanted to kind of scroll through these. Talking about the addition, I took care of the handicap access. It was very small. I'm not sure how many people actually use the sledding hill, but it looks like a great sledding hill.
It's very popular.
Yeah. Yeah, the natural light kind of deep in the space where it's tucked into the earth, that's kind of where we have to start providing those skylights. Okay, and now I'm really excited to see the comments for option 1 now, since it's the one that is kind of the continuation of the historic building.
While we're switching around, I have one more person that I would like, who hasn't had the chance to make a comment. Would that be okay? Can we squeeze it in?
Absolutely.
Okay, Nancy, I'm unmuting you. If you would like to introduce yourself, welcome to the meeting tonight.
Thanks. Nancy Wilson, 227 Pilot Knob. I appreciate the nostalgia around the sledding hill, but I've got to say, I've got 3 grandchildren in Manitou Springs, and I've taken them to the sledding hill. And in fact, last winter, they went zooming down the hill, over the wall at the end of the hill, over the sidewalk and into the street. I think the sledding hill was probably had enough snow on it last winter, maybe 3 or 4 times. I think we're putting a huge emphasis on a feature that's nice, but is way too emphasized in our conversation. As somebody just said, you can sled on both sides of the hill, on the east side and the west side of the hill. And to build our design around a sledding hill that's used these days, probably because of climate change, 3 or 4 times a year, and in some ways is dangerous with kids going down. Like I say, this was a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old who flew off that wall at the end of the hill. I just think we need to put the sledding hill in perspective. I think the park around the library, of course, we all love and care a lot about, but I think there's a balance there somewhere between saving the sledding hill, which maybe could be reduced a little in length, and adding a wonderful feature to our community.
Okay, great, thank you. We've received some other comments along those lines, independent of this. I appreciate you saying that. Okay, great. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you. Yeah, just go through the key comments. Again, really good ones, really thoughtful. But this one, it's a lot of it has to do with the materiality of it blending with the existing structure, but it's also the scale. This is a 2-story addition, so it's it has the most effect on the site in terms of visually being noticed. And the point about the sledding hill is received. Don't need more drive-throughs. Yeah, that's kind of where the conversation was going with the stakeholder group, is trying to maintain as much of that park space as we possibly can. Monster, a beast. That's for the toss column, I'm guessing. Option one's a behemoth. It definitely has more of a presence on the site. It is more visually impactful. And yeah, the historic design is, it's more of what's adjacent to it, kind of fits in and blends. And then, yeah, in terms of the architectural style, context is really important. And, whichever option we move forward with, we want to make sure is appropriate and of its place. Seamless, indeed. Giant imposing addition. Maybe I should move to the toss section now. Nothing, I realized you had to do this one. The functionality of this one is more restricted and less flexible, just because of the needing to spread the program out on 2 stories. We're training a tree, replanting. We have a great landscape architect on this project, and I think adding to the park and not just preserving what's there will be a great step to the next generations.
Well, and to that point, I think as we move through the process, we haven't completed it yet, but we will have arborists come look at the health of all the trees and help us understand where those trees are and what love they may need to continue being successful on the site. And if there are any that aren't in good shape, then we'll plan accordingly. But that is part of a conversation with Parab as well, about how we manage the trees and take care of those.
Yeah. So I just switched it over to the toss. So if there's something we can get rid of this option to make it better, what would it be? Everything's not a desired answer. It's boring. Yeah, this is a really important and tricky conversation to be had. What is Manitou today, and what does it want to be? And that's with a historic preservation commission can really start to help mediate that conversation. This one feels boring after seeing the other options. Get rid of option 1, reduce its size. One of the trees is already dying. Is it the one on the the east side of the site, maybe?
I'm not sure. There's 2 that look like they need to be checked out.
There's not much
This one, yeah, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, this, just to talk to the flexibility of the space, compared to having an open floor plan, which is where we try to get our library designs towards. When you split that area into 2 floors and then you start to kind of push and pull the facade, it starts to kind of imply because again, we're just working off the approved footprint of the past, but you start to imply what that space is going to become or its best use. So, you know, if that space works out perfectly today, and that would be our goal when we design it, that's great. But it's also really important to think about, you know, how will this library adapt, you know, 50 to 100 years from now. Doesn't feel open and welcoming. Not letting the Sledding Hill drive the design is a fair point. The modern design take us to the future. And it's fair, you can't possibly match the beautiful original building, you know, that the artisans that built that original building might not be available today.
I just want to let you know, we've noticed a lot of comments that have been coming in, which has been great. So as we've had folks coming on and off the meeting, we've been up over 50 participants who have joined in, so not including us. So that's great. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's participating in the meeting and providing comments. That's great, and input and asking questions.
This is a really great, really precise comment. Just talking about this is a library, and its first and foremost goal is to function to the best of that ability. We require more staffing for the active floors.
Well, that's true. I mean, that was a point when we were looking at this design last week. We talked about that this would be more human resource intensive to keep eyes on all places and ensure it was that it was staffed appropriately, which puts I think burden on in a lot of places.
Yeah, absolutely. And this comment's really great. You know, the accessibility is a priority here and doesn't need to dominate the park. And you know, that's kind of what led us to the options that were more dug into the earth. And since we weren't matching the height of the building, it kind of lended itself towards trying to minimize the impact on the building. And I'm sure we're all seeing that there's people that really love the historic look and how it blends with the existing, and there's people that really love the modern look. And what's going to be really important is just kind of working through and shredding, you know, towards different options to make sure that the final path that the city chooses is what best reflects the community. I know I keep saying that, but we truly do mean it. And our response is slowing down here. Ready for the create?
I think so. Go ahead and go to create. It all of a sudden just slowed. It was like everybody had their comment. Yeah, great. Fair. Thank you.
Okay, and now, you know, lastly, again, we've been through this 2 other times now, but like, what can we do to this option to elevate it and make it even better? What's this missing to really set it apart and make it the best option? I'll move those to the toss after the meeting. Yeah, add outdoor space and kind of blur that line between the indoor-outdoor transition. Now this option, the Thorpe option does have that rooftop quiet area reading outside, you know, which is kind of more of this like private secluded moment. And, you know, part of that was what inspired us to, you know, what if that quiet reading area wrapped around the building, and it led us down that path of digging into the earth further. Yeah, adding the bigger windows. Bigger windows on this option, it's gonna be tricky just because we're trying to match the existing structure. So by really trying to honor the existing building, it kind of holds us to a little tighter of a standard. So if we recess the addition further on the hill, from the south elevation, it's going to read the existing building being more prominent. But I'll pull up the north elevation real quick here and run around. If we move it further to the south, I mean, you can see now it's already proud of that south elevation, which we try not to do on a historic building. They would just do that even more so. Make this beast smaller.
Your point is a good one, because when we do go back to Historic Preservation Commission and have these conversations, they'll be asking us they'll be bringing these points up from a very technical perspective when it comes to historic preservation, right? And so we're going to need to be able to meet the bar, if you will, on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, there's the SOI who's kind of governing the historic structures, and who the preservation committee is going to be kind of utilizing as their guideline, has their recommendations of how you honor these existing buildings. So whether it's a traditional building intended to match, or a modern building trying to elevate the existing structure, there's it's not just being done haphazardly. It's a very thoughtful process.
So did I see a comment fly by about add art? Is that something we could consider for all of the designs? I think there's
like kind of like a community art space, like a gallery almost.
A gallery, or we have a very strong artistic community and a great relationship with the MAC, which is, I think that relationship, as we're expecting it to, is going to carry over into wherever we go with this with Carnegie building. That's our ideal, right? There are things that are at the MAC, they're absolutely fantastic, including art. And as we look at how we share some of the space and move into this building a little bit, how can we bring, that might be something really interesting to think about. How could we bring some of that art element over from the MAC and what the MAC represents in our community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about option 3, which is the first one we presented on, is how that roof space could actually be a sculpture garden, or maybe pieces are put around the perimeter to be displayed to the community.
Yeah, great suggestion. Yes. Not for tossing art, but creating. Create.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. That's technology isn't perfect. I can blame it instead of my mouse control.
What is fun about this, though, is we can see comments, right? So people can, give ideas and thought, and we're able to see it and track it. So that is something I do like about the technology of this meeting.
Yeah, definitely. And usually we're doing this in person, and as we're going through each of these, there'd be more of a dialogue. But this is where we are right now. Yes, so we based all 3 options on the same square footage of the original concept. Yeah, it looks bigger. Definitely, it's that two-story mass. And just kind of while we're all together still, maybe I'll just flip through the options again one last time, just so we can see them and their impacts changing. So we'll go from the previous design, and we'll go back to the option 2, which is into the hillside. This tries to give back its park space with its green roof. And then to the first option we presented on, technically option 3, which tries to celebrate that heart of the park and turn it into functional community space. I'm flipping through too many windows on my side. Okay. Well, I really appreciate all the feedback that everyone's provided in this. And I wish we could dive into each one of them much more deeply, but what we're going to do next is compile these and kind of read through them and discuss them as a group and really look at ways that we can tweak each one of these options and, make sure that when we present it to the city that it's kind of that best representation of the option that it could be. And maybe that means matching colors of the modern options to the existing structure, or adding brick so they're not modern, or maybe it's enlarging the windows of the this previous option that's been discussed. But the best part is it's all these ideas and comments that really inspire and push us to refine the design into the best thing that it could possibly be. So with that, the next steps is for us to do exactly that. Go back, refine the design, get together with the library more, make sure that it's meeting the needs of the users, and then we're going to present these 3 options to the city for them to select one to ultimately move forward with.
Yeah, and if I could tag off of that, so getting into some of the specifics of what does that look like, right? We've got a pretty large stakeholder group that includes the school district. The school district has interest in library space. And so as we look at these designs, how does this meet the needs for the students in our community and their families? We will be visiting, I'll be taking this to Parab as well as HPC. In 2 weeks, we will be back at City Council. When we get to City Council in a couple of weeks, it'll be a presentation, not that much different than this. It's not the final conversation with City Council by any means, but it's really to have this type of a focused dialogue with City Council and zero in, as Eric just said, on the designs a little bit more. What I'll be doing after the meeting, once we are recording it, and we'll check the integrity, make sure it's working well. We'll be posting, the city's PIO, Public Information Officer Alex, and I will be posting the video of this meeting tonight, along with PDFs of this presentation and the design, so you can take some time and really you can print them out, you can mark them up on your screen, you continue to provide feedback. I'll encourage you to go ahead and get that to planning. Planning is helping facilitate this process and help understand where the community wants us to go. So just to remind everyone, you can email us best at planning@manitou-springs.co.gov. And I think we've got just a couple more minutes. And Eric, do you mind? There's been a couple more hands that have gone up. Do you mind if we let those folks I see?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to start with, let's see. Nancy Fortune, you're unmuted. If you would like to introduce yourself, welcome to the meeting tonight.
Sure, Nancy Fortune. Fascinating meeting. Thank you so much for doing this. I just wanted to question Christine about you saying it's on the city council agenda in 2 weeks. I actually don't see you on the agenda until August 10th. So just may want to take another look to make sure that you're scheduled appropriately. That's all. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, I thought we were July 13th. So we'll check that and, okay, thank you. So stay tuned. I will keep an update on the city website for that. Okay, one more individual. Randy, I'm going to unmute you if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Randy Harper, and not unfortunately, I should say, fortunately, I'm calling from Saipan, and I missed part of the meeting. Just the connections weren't working quite as well as they normally do. But I'm Randy Harper. I grew up in Manitou. And I just have and you guys probably covered it, but I was just wondering, I'm looking at the designs and those are very interesting. Have you guys discussed possibly the addition heading to the south, which would be towards the school? And the only reason I bring that up is I've been thinking about it too, is you could let gravity work with you as far as ADA, and that perhaps the entrance, to the upper story at any rate would be at ground level up there, and you could possibly take advantage of solar and with that design. And I'm just wondering, have you guys discussed the possibility of expanding towards the south, upslope, if you will?
Yeah, so we did kind of study all four elevations, if you will, or size of the building for the pros and cons of where the building could go. And the south was a really great location initially, in terms of having the main entry at grade. It's maybe not the most prominent elevation of the building, but the issue that kind of ruled it out of the three options we pursued was the flexibility to ultimately or to potentially be able to serve the site amenities or parking or book drop off. Earlier on in the project that was on the table, and we've started to move away from that, but just maintain the flexibility for that I think was really important. And that's really the only location where if that's the direction it headed, that it would be feasible.
So it's not an impossibility, or what do you think overall from your design expertise?
It's not. It could. The addition itself is feasible there. It just limits the flexibility of the site to provide vehicular accessibility in the future.
All right. I just think that having that solar aspect of it and the library and the direction and the grade and all that, I appreciate your consideration on that.
Yeah, but you're definitely right. The south elevation is going to kind of have the best solar orientation. So it's a really, really good point.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, with that, there's just one last hand up, and that's Denise. She probably will be able to clarify the date and make sure that we're on the right path here. So welcome, Denise.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thank you. I think it was a great meeting, and Christine, Eric, and John, thanks for putting this together and organizing it and getting public feedback. I do have a couple of questions, and Christine, I can't pull up the agenda right now, so I don't know about that date, but I don't believe we have you on for July 13th, but that's another, we can finalize that. But a question I have is, what are the next steps for the HPC? Because they have to approve it in order for it to move forward. So what's the next steps for that? And when do we get estimated cost for each of those? Because that will be another decision point. And I think it's something that council will probably want and the public wants to know is, when do we start getting estimated costs for each of these, and what does that look like?
Sure, good question. I'll tackle HPC, and Eric, you can talk through the pricing if you want, how that works. With HPC, we will need formal HPC approval of a final design. And so I'm envisioning that it's going to be sort of a two-step process. So the first is really an introduction to, here's where we are. We're looking at these 3 designs. Here's the community feedback so far, more of an update. And then once a design has been chosen, then we would take it back to HPC for a formal a formal review or decision, if you will. And at that point, that would include the floor plan, that would include exactly what the materials are, any other considerations about the historic aspects of the building. We don't have to, with HPC, have to review the interior so much as we need to do the exterior. They will have a lot of questions for sure about the interior. But so I would, that would be, HPC would be before, say, Planning Commission or anything like that, if that was where we needed to go.
Okay, thanks. Because the HPC has to approve the design, correct, Christine? So
yes,
if
they sure
don't
do.
like design 1 and 2, then you can't really take it forward because they have to go through and approve that.
Exactly. That's absolutely correct.
So when are you thinking you're going to take it to HPC?
Well, we would be taking that forward probably in August or September. Just in terms of an update would be as soon as August. And if we were looking for an approval, then that could be as soon as later in the fall. But we typically wouldn't take it to them until we're further along with the actual design and the choice of materials. So I think it's still a couple of 3 months out before we could get on the schedule and really have a good conversation for an approval. We can take an update, but we're not there yet with an approval.
Okay, thank you. And then the cost, when are you thinking those numbers will be at least an estimate?
Yeah, so the estimate part of this community meeting is really an important milestone for us to get through, just so we know kind of the general direction that all 3 of these options need to go, and what we have to make sure we capture. And so, now that we have this feedback and we can start to really crank up the detail of each of these, we're also going to be producing, our consultants will be getting through their narratives of the different building systems, so the structure, the heating and cooling and things of that nature. And so once we have those compiled in the next 2 weeks, we could begin the cost estimating process, kind of for that initial evaluation.
Great, thank you. And again, a great meeting, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, with that, we're at the top, almost at the top of the next hour. So thank you so much to everyone who has joined. Please know that as soon as we get done processing the video from tonight, we'll post that on the website along with PDFs of the presentation and the designs. And as always, welcome an email, a phone call, a cup of coffee, whatever is your preferred means of communication. Happy to get together. So thank you to Eric and Alyssa, excuse me, and John for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I really appreciate everyone's feedback. This is going to be really helpful.
Great. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.